Boeing under fire headlines are dominating the aviation world, and Boeing's once reliable image has taken a serious hit. From emergency landings to fatal accidents, the company is in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Are these incidents signs of a deeper problem at Boeing, or are there factors beyond the manufacturer's control? Let's find out. These are the most remarkable Boeing incidents of 2024. The year had just begun when Boeing faced its first serious incident. Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 took a dangerous turn when a door panel blew out mid-flight. On January 5, 2024, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, a Boeing 7379 MAX, departed from Portland International Airport. Just minutes into the flight, at 16,000 feet, a loud bang echoed through the cabin. The aircraft experienced sudden decompression when the left mid-exit plug door, a panel covering an unused emergency exit, detached from the fuselage. Loose items were drawn out through the opening as oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. In the cockpit, the pilots acted decisively, initiating an emergency descent to 10,000 feet to stabilize cabin pressure. Flight attendants moved passengers away from the breach and provided oxygen where necessary.
We just depressurized to try to maintain 10,000, and we need to return back to Portland.
The pilots communicated with air traffic control and returned the aircraft to Portland for an emergency landing. Their calm and decisive actions averted a far more serious incident. Despite the sudden decompression and disruption in the cabin, they maintained control. 7 passengers and 1 crew member sustained minor injuries. According to FAA and Alaska Airlines statements, the plug door, designed to stay sealed through air pressure during flight, failed when mechanical latches likely weakened under high aerodynamic stress. Without the proper pressure to hold it in place, the door blasted outward, compromising the aircraft's structural integrity. Boeing's 737 MAX has had a troubled history in recent years, marked by 2 fatal crashes. And now, this incident has once again put the aircraft in the spotlight. In response, Alaska Airlines grounded its entire 9 MAX fleet for inspections. One day after the incident, the Federal Aviation Administration issued an emergency airworthiness directive. It required all Boeing MAX 9 aircraft equipped with a mid-cabin plug door to be grounded pending inspection and, if necessary, corrective actions. A few weeks later, another Boeing aircraft faced a serious emergency, this time involving an Atlas Air 747 freighter. The Atlas Air freighter departed into the Miami night, bound for Puerto Rico. The 5-member crew expected an uneventful flight. But seconds after takeoff, an explosion erupted from the left inboard engine, breaking the calm and lighting up the night sky. The crew declared a mayday and initiated emergency protocols.
Mayday, Giant 095, heavy engine fire. Request section back to the airport.
Witnesses on the ground reported streaks of fire and sparks erupting from one of the engines.
It's on fire! Mom!
Inside the cockpit, the pilots acted swiftly. They shut down the malfunctioning engine and discharged a fire suppression bottle. The fire warning ceased, but the damage was already done. The freighter, carrying hazardous materials, leveled off at 3,000 feet and initiated a turn back toward Miami International Airport. Despite one engine being offline, the remaining 3 engines provided enough thrust to maintain control. The crew navigated the aircraft to a safe landing on runway 09, 15 minutes after takeoff. Emergency responders examined the freighter but found no immediate need for intervention. According to NTSB reports, post-flight inspections revealed a startling cause. A borescope plug had been left improperly secured during a routine maintenance inspection 4 days earlier. This tiny but critical oversight allowed hot gases to escape, severely damaging the engine's thrust reverser. The intense heat even created a softball-sized hole above the engine cowling, underscoring the potential severity of the incident. Thanks to the aircraft's design and the crew's expertise, disaster was averted. Atlas Air grounded the aircraft for repairs, while the FAA and NTSB called for stricter maintenance oversight, especially for third-party vendors. 2 months later, another incident unfolded, this time involving a Boeing from United Airlines. Just seconds after takeoff, a key component detached from the aircraft. On March 7th, United Airlines Flight 35, a Boeing 777, departed from San Francisco International Airport, bound for Osaka, Japan. But seconds after takeoff, a 256-pound tire detached from the aircraft and crashed into an airport parking lot. It shattered a fence, damaged several cars, and crushed the rear window of a vehicle. Fortunately, no one on the ground was injured. The pilots remained calm, continuing their ascent while carefully assessing the situation to ensure the aircraft remained stable. The Boeing 777's robust design allowed it to handle the loss of a tire without immediate danger. Concerned about potential secondary damage, the pilots coordinated with air traffic control. They decided to divert to Los Angeles International Airport, where more suitable emergency response facilities were available. Fire engines were stationed along the runway as the plane made a smooth and uneventful landing. The landing gear safely supported the aircraft despite the missing tire. Investigators identified maintenance issues as the likely cause of the tire's detachment. Improper procedures during a prior inspection may have led to inadequate security of the wheel assembly. United Airlines replaced the damaged aircraft with another Boeing 777, minimizing disruption for passengers continuing their journey to Japan. The airline pledged full cooperation with FAA and NTSB investigations to identify the root cause and prevent future incidents. Fast forward 8 days and another incident with a Boeing aircraft occurred, this time in the Netherlands. As KLM Flight 1074 neared Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, the flight from Manchester seemed like just another routine landing. But as the runway came into view, the Boeing 737 suddenly roared back into the sky. It was a tense moment for the passengers. What could have gone wrong? The aircraft's flaps, essential for creating lift and reducing speed during landing, malfunctioned, forcing the pilots to abort the approach just 500 feet above the ground. The aircraft climbed back to 3,000 feet as the pilots worked to diagnose the issue. However, the increased drag from the improperly configured flaps caused fuel consumption to rise sharply. Within 20 minutes, the crew declared a fuel emergency, informing air traffic control that their remaining fuel would last only about 30 minutes.
Declaring an emergency at this point. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Despite the stress of the situation, the pilots managed the emergency well. After extensive troubleshooting, the flaps began responding again, allowing the pilots to attempt another landing. Fire crews lined the runway as the aircraft approached runway 27. The plane touched down safely, and all 128 passengers disembarked without injury. The investigation revealed that the malfunction was caused by flap overspeed, where the flaps are extended beyond safe speed limits, and wind shear during the aborted landing. The minimal fuel reserve standard on short-haul flights further compounded the crisis, leaving little margin for error. Grounded for 9 hours for inspection and repair, the aircraft returned to service later that day. While not necessarily the fault of Boeing, the incident highlights the ongoing challenges in aviation safety and reminds us of the complexity of air travel. 2 months later, another serious incident occurred, this time involving FedEx Flight 6238 with nose gear problems. On May 8th, FedEx Flight 6238 was on its final approach to Istanbul Airport. The Boeing 767-300 freighter was descending steadily. But as the crew prepared for landing, a sudden warning turned the routine approach into an emergency. At approximately 1,800 feet, the ECAs displayed a warning indicating an unsafe nose gear position, signaling that the landing gear had not fully deployed. The pilots initiated a go-around, climbing back to a safe altitude to diagnose the issue. For 25 tense minutes, they worked through emergency checklists, but the nose gear remained unresponsive. To confirm the issue visually, the crew performed a low-altitude flyby past the control tower to check that the front gear was not extended. The situation was clear. The aircraft would need to attempt a belly landing. At 8:17 a.m. local time, the pilots brought the plane onto runway 16 right. They skillfully touched down on the main landing gear before carefully lowering the nose to the ground. Sparks and smoke trailed behind as the metal nose scraped along the asphalt. The freighter stayed centered on the runway, coming to a controlled stop. Emergency teams were standing by but were not needed. The crew emerged unharmed and no fire occurred. The root cause was later identified as a failure in the nose gear's locking mechanism, which prevented proper deployment. This issue wasn't due to a design flaw, but rather a malfunction that may have resulted from maintenance or operational factors. The runway was temporarily closed for inspections and debris clearance, causing minor delays for other flights. After the emergency landing of FedEx Flight 6238, the crew aboard Singapore Airlines Flight 321 faced a completely different crisis. They encountered severe turbulence, which would challenge their training and put the safety of the passengers at risk. On May 21st, a Boeing 777 from Singapore Airlines was flying over southern Myanmar on its journey from London to Singapore. Without warning, it encountered intense turbulence triggered by stormy weather. The aircraft was violently lifted, prompting the autopilot to adjust and descend back to 37,000 feet. Unbelted passengers and loose items were thrown into the air, while others were slammed back into their seats with force. The pilots acted quickly, stabilizing the plane before re-engaging the autopilot. After ensuring the aircraft was stable, they assessed injuries among passengers and crew. Over 100 injuries were reported, including one fatality due to a heart attack, so the captain decided to divert to Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport. The aircraft landed safely, and medical teams waited to assist the injured. The turbulence encountered by the flight was a natural phenomenon caused by an updraft linked to storm activity in the region. There is no indication that the aircraft followed an inappropriate route or that the flight planning was incorrect. While the seatbelt sign was reportedly on, conflicting accounts suggest that not all passengers were informed to fasten their seatbelts. Additionally, meal service was ongoing during the event, which is unusual during expected turbulence. Singapore Airlines has since revised its policies, suspending all meal services during turbulence and reinforcing passenger safety announcements. The incident was a stark reminder of the importance of adhering to safety measures even during routine flights. Following the severe turbulence faced by Singapore Airlines, another unexpected challenge arose just days later, this time involving Southwest Airlines Flight 746, where the crew would have to manage an entirely different crisis. On May 25th, Southwest Airlines Flight 746 was cruising at 34,000 feet on its way from Phoenix to Oakland when, without warning, the plane began to shake violently. The Boeing 737 MAX 8 experienced a rare aerodynamic phenomenon called a Dutch roll, a combined oscillating movement involving yawing from side to side and rolling over the wings. The aircraft's yaw damper, an automatic system designed to stabilize the plane, typically suppresses this oscillation. However, the yaw damper system on this flight malfunctioned, causing the oscillations to intensify and stressing the fuselage, which led to damage to critical components. The pilots continued their course to Oakland without realizing the full extent of the issue. Once on the ground, maintenance crews discovered substantial damage to the tail section, including the rudder's standby power control unit, a crucial backup for the main rudder system. The FAA, NTSB, and Boeing are collaborating to identify the root cause of the yaw damper failure and its implications for the 737 MAX series. Investigators have found that the malfunction began mid-flight, as indicated by data from the flight data recorder. However, the cockpit voice recorder had already overwritten relevant audio, limiting insights into the crew's situation handling. Roughly 1 month later, Korean Air Flight 189 experienced a sudden loss of cabin pressure, forcing the aircraft into a rapid descent. This urgent and dangerous situation demanded immediate action to protect everyone on board. On June 22nd, 30 minutes after departing Incheon International Airport, the pilots of Korean Air Flight 189 were alerted to a pressurization fault. Flying over South Korea's Jeju Island, the crew immediately recognized the critical nature of the situation. Oxygen masks deployed as the pilots rapidly descended to a lower, safer altitude. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere turned chaotic, with oxygen masks dangling above passengers and the aircraft shaking violently. Videos captured the scene, showing passengers struggling with the sudden pressure change and attempting to stabilize themselves. The situation calmed once the aircraft reached a safe altitude, but many passengers began experiencing symptoms from the rapid descent. 15 passengers reported hyperventilation and ear pain due to the sharp pressure change. Fortunately, the pilots skillfully navigated the aircraft back to the departure airport, where it landed safely. Emergency teams treated 17 passengers for medical issues, but all were later released. Pressurization failures at high altitudes are dangerous and can quickly cause life-threatening conditions. The pilot's decision to descend to a breathable altitude likely prevented serious injuries. The cause of the pressurization fault is still under investigation, with the aircraft systems and environmental factors being examined. A replacement flight was arranged, and passengers completed their journey. Several months later, the crew of Total Cargo Flight 5682 faced a desperate battle to land after a fire broke out in the cargo hold, with communication lost just minutes before landing. On November 9th, a Boeing 737-400 from Total Cargo was en route from Vitoria to São Paulo's Guarulhos International Airport. Mid-flight, the crew received a concerning notification. A fire had ignited in the cargo hold. Declaring an emergency, the pilots began their descent toward the airport, hoping to reach the runway before the situation worsened. However, as the aircraft neared Guarulhos, communication with air traffic control was suddenly lost. Despite this, the plane's transponder remained active, allowing controllers to monitor its approach. After a tense descent, the aircraft finally touched down on runway 28 left. Upon landing, the situation escalated. As the plane came to a halt, flames erupted from the cargo hold. Emergency crews rushed to the scene and quickly extinguished the fire. Remarkably, the flight crew was able to escape using cockpit emergency ropes, avoiding injury. The aircraft was severely damaged, with much of its airframe rendered beyond repair due to the fire. Investigators are now focusing on determining the cause of the fire, which led to the aircraft being declared a total loss. Following the fire aboard Total Cargo Flight 5682, we now move on to Vancouver International Airport, where another cargo flight encountered trouble. It's November 19th, a stormy night, as Flight 2387, a Boeing 767 from Cargo Jet, prepares to land. As the aircraft landed on runway 08 left, a series of unforeseen challenges led to a dangerous overrun. Despite having almost 10,000 feet of runway, the plane could not slow down in time and skidded off the end, coming to rest in the soft, overrun area. No one was injured, but the nose gear and lower fuselage sustained significant damage. Several factors likely contributed to the overrun. A light tailwind reduced braking performance, while heavy rain and slushy conditions on the runway made stopping even more difficult. The Transportation Safety Board is investigating the flight data and runway conditions to pinpoint the cause. Preliminary analysis suggests potential issues with the aircraft's flap deployment, which could have compromised its landing performance. A week later, disaster struck in Lithuania, where a Swiftair Boeing 737 cargo jet crashed into a residential area. On November 25th, a Swiftair Boeing 737 carrying freight but no passengers was on approach to Vilnius International Airport when disaster struck. Preliminary reports indicate that the crew reported an unspecified emergency shortly after beginning their descent. Eyewitnesses described hearing an unusual engine noise and seeing the aircraft descending at an abnormally steep angle. Moments later, the freighter crashed into a residential area near the airport. Local authorities, supported by CCTV footage, confirmed that the aircraft appeared to be in a controlled descent before losing altitude rapidly. The crash site revealed significant wreckage dispersion, suggesting a high-impact collision. One crew member was killed, and the other 3 were injured. Lithuanian aviation authorities and Swiftair's safety team are investigating the cause of the crash. ATC recordings reveal that the crew issued a distress call but were unable to provide specifics before communication ceased. The aircraft's flight recorders have been recovered and are expected to yield critical insights into the sequence of events leading to the crash. Fast forward to the year's final days, when disaster struck again. On December 29th, a Jeju Air Boeing 737 crashed at Muan International Airport, marking the deadliest aviation accident in South Korea in decades. The flight was uneventful until the final approach. Just before landing, air traffic control warned about the possibility of a bird strike. The aircraft then deviated several times from the approach path, possibly to avoid birds, but it always returned to the correct path. The airspeed remained stable and the rate of descent was normal. Muan International Airport has the highest rate of bird strikes among the 14 regional airports in South Korea, with 10 incidents in the last 5 years. The aircraft was approaching the airport around 9 a.m., a time when birds are typically most active. 2 minutes after receiving the warning, the crew declared a mayday, likely due to a bird strike. They then initiated a go-around. As of the time this video was made, the exact reason for this decision remains unclear. Following standard procedure, the crew retracted the flaps and landing gear and requested to land in the opposite direction. This likely indicated the situation's urgency, suggesting they wanted to land as quickly as possible. They made a 180-degree turn and attempted to land on runway 19 without flaps and with the landing gear retracted. The reason the landing gear, flaps, and their respective backup systems failed to function or were not deployed remains unknown and must be determined through further investigation. Without the flaps deployed, the aircraft's landing speed was significantly higher than usual. Moreover, it touched down nearly halfway down the runway, leaving little space to decelerate. The nose was kept up during landing, which resulted in the aircraft maintaining a high speed due to less friction, making it hard to slow down. The right engine thrust reverser appeared to be used, but the plane could still not stop in time. The aircraft eventually overran the runway and crashed into a berm encasing a concrete structure that supported an antenna array for the instrument landing system. The collision killed all 175 passengers and 4 of the 6 crew members. The surviving 2 cabin crew were seated in the rear of the plane, which detached from the fuselage, and were rescued with injuries. They were taken to the hospital but were later discharged. Both black boxes were recovered. The Aviation and Railway Accident Investigation Board leads the investigation with assistance from the NTSB, Federal Aviation Administration, and Boeing. As you've seen, Boeing isn't always to blame. External factors like weather, maintenance errors, or just bad luck also play a role. Our thoughts are with the victims and their families of all the deadly incidents discussed. What are your thoughts on Boeing's safety and reputation? Share your perspective in the comments below.